Joining us now, Wired senior writer and author of the Inner Loop newsletter, Jake LaHutte. Writer-at-large, host of the Bulwark podcast, and MSNBC political analyst Tim Miller, and former Republican congressman and former senior advisor for the January 6th Select Committee, Denver Riggleman. All right, got some news from CNBC that we're going to read right now. This is Donald Trump talking to reporters, suggesting the federal government might revoke the licenses of broadcast television networks that are, quote, against me. So let me read it. There is a license. I'll give you an example, Trump told reporters. I have read someplace that the networks were 97% against me. Again, 97% negative. And yet I won, and easily, all 7 swing states. They're 97% against. They give me only bad press. They're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. The president said that decision will be up to Brendan Carr, the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. I think Brendan Carr is outstanding. He's a patriot. He loves our country, and he's a tough guy. So we'll have to see. Tim, take it away.
Well, I mean, I don't even think that it should be in the frame of cancel culture, right? Because we can all debate what we think about cancel culture and whether that's good or bad. But that's like not what this is. This is the federal government pressuring media companies to silence critics of the president. I mean, this is straight out of the authoritarian playbook. It is an attempt to silence speech directly from the government. And it's also corruption, right? And I think it's as much a corruption. It's certainly more of a corruption story than is a cancel culture story, because what you had here, in addition to what Brendan Carr said yesterday that you just played with Benny Johnson, he also mentioned that the affiliates should act. And this is important context because Nexstar is I think, the biggest affiliate group. What we mean by affiliates is like the local ABC stations, right? They're run in cities around the country. And they're trying to do a merger with Tegna. They're trying to acquire Tegna, and they need Brendan Carr to approve it. And Nexstar was actually first to say that they're going to take Jimmy Kimmel off the air. And they said it a couple hours after Brendan Carr, the head of the FCC, was like, I really want the affiliates to act on this. I mean, that is this is direct pressure from the government. And this is a company that is folding to pressure from the government, that is silencing speech because they want profits, because they want to merge. There's just no other way to see it other than that. And I think that demonstrates, I think, more accurately like what we're looking at here.
You know, we were going to talk specifically about Jimmy Kimmel, but with Trump's comments, this does feel much broader now, saying that he's going to go after the broadcast networks because he says they're 97% against him. It reminds me of something they did during the 2016 campaign. They literally went through reporters' tweets and then did a percentage of whether that reporter was on their side. And they came after some reporters and said, you are, 93% against me. I can see from all of the tweets that you've put out that you're not on my side, so I'm not going to talk to you. That happened during the campaign, so this is certainly an echo of that. At the same time, there is a lot of, and I'll bring it back to Kimmel just for a moment. There is a lot of debate online about whether what Kimmel said deserves a suspension. And I want to play Dave Portnoy's take on this because he is the one arguing the other side of it. It's a read, we had it as a soundbite. It is a read. Hold on, let me get it. Let me find it. It's in my papers. Here it is. The founder of Barstool Sports told the New York Times he didn't think that Kimmel's removal was an example of cancel culture. And he said that when a person says something that a ton of people find offensive, rude, dumb in real time, and then that person is punished for it, that's not cancel culture. That is a consequence for your actions. Denver, what do you think of that?
I think Dave Portnoy is an expert in offensive, rude, and dumb, number one. So I think he's the perfect guy to make a statement on the opposite side of this. On the other side, this is way, Tim's right. This is well beyond cancel culture. So you know what I do, Katie? I actually wanted to source what the public interest standard was. And it's pretty interesting when you look at the public interest standard when you're talking about Brendan Carr and why Dave Portnoy is so wrong, because you got to read and source things and not just make things up as you go along. When you take a look at it, the Supreme Court has already said the public interest standard can't get in the way of the First Amendment. By the way, the public interest standard has never been used for this. And if it was 10 years ago, conservatives, and I think Tim would agree with me too, 10 years ago, we would call Brendan Carr a communist apparatchik, right? That's what the conservatives would be calling him. And even 6 years ago, Brendan Carr would call himself a communist apparatchik because he tweeted in 2019 that there's no way that the public interest standards should be used to go against the First Amendment and free speech. And I just find it amazing that he could turn that quickly and that we're having an argument about cancel culture when this is arguing about actually the FCC threatening ABC and local networks if they don't suspend them by removing the license, which is something well outside the purview and as unconstitutional as you get as far as I'm concerned.
And again, it's not just Jimmy Kimmel, Jake. We could have this conversation solely about Jimmy Kimmel, but Donald Trump has now made it about all the broadcast networks.
Yeah.
And we've seen him go after the broadcast networks for instances that he said is unfair. And he has gotten millions of dollars off of ABC and off of CBS. CBS needed a merger. ABC was in the middle of litigation, so to get him off their back, they paid him. I mean, that's, what people would criticize them for, and people criticize CBS for needing the merger, and that's why they paid that cash. And now Donald Trump is saying explicitly, I think that we should go after them because they're not with me.
Yeah, and to go with what Tim said, that's the basic exchange here is you have these conglomerates who are like, okay, we'll give you a proverbial scalp if you give us the ability to further consolidate. And what I got into in my newsletter this week is peeling back the curtain a little bit about what it's like to actually deal with Trump's advisors and the people making decisions here in terms of how much of this conspiratorial thinking they believe and how motivated are they to carry out a crackdown in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination. And it's a tough combo because they are genuinely distraught. He was friends, Kirk, with a number of my sources. And at this point, they're pretty comfortable with the rationale being as simple as, well, quote unquote, they did it to us with this cancellation first. We're doing it back to you. They're not really interested in having the back and forth about whether
Is it the heat of the moment? Is it the emotions that are running so high?
I think the emotions are part of it, but it's not the only story. I think this also just fits into the broader pattern we've seen in Trump's second term, where it's all about getting a little bit of a cut or a little bit of a deal here. When he was talking about the TikTok deal earlier, for example, he said the United States is getting a fee plus. And I have asked the White House, by the way, what that means. No word back yet. And really, we're getting into now a form where this is just plug and chug, Katie. This is whatever their pre-existing priority was. If they can use
they can find an example, they
will go full force to fit it in there. Yeah.
So I guess we have to talk about, Tim, also how we got to this point. And there are, a lot of people out there who are going to cheer Donald Trump for this. A lot of Americans who will cheer Donald Trump for pushing back and saying it's about time. The liberal media deserves this. Liberal TV shows deserve this. The elite deserve this. Harvard deserves this. These law firms, they all deserve this. Where does that anger come from? What happened? Why do so many people believe that Donald Trump is doing them justice by getting licenses removed or threatening licenses or demanding millions of dollars in cash?
How long do we have for that question, Katie?
We have about 63
where does this come from?
seconds.
63 seconds. Okay. Look, there is a deep-seated grievance the conservatives have had that they have lost the culture. They've had a deep-seated grievance against the media since, you could listen to your colleague Rachel Maddow's podcast about Spiro Agnew, and I'm sure we could go back further than that to hear about the right going after the media.
They were very upset about Walter Cronkite, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, the right was always going
No,
mad
they were.
about the
They
media
were really
going
upset
after
about Walter Cronkite. They said they would wear pins, say, fire CBS or fire Cronkite at the RNC convention back in the 60s.
So this is just the great vengeance. And I think at some point a boiling point reached over, and what Donald Trump offered them, what people said in 2016, you followed this when you were covering, was buddy fights. They wanted Trump because they thought that he was going to fight the other side, whether that be media or like you said, universities or elites broadly or whatever. And this is him following through on that promise. He's doing it unconstitutionally, of course. He's doing it unprincipled when it comes to the questions of free speech. But like at that kind of spiritual level of MAGA, which is he's going to make the other side upset, he's following through on that part of it. And I think that's why folks will cheer it on.
Denver, weigh in.
Well, I got to tell you, when you're looking at what's happening, and I'm glad Tim got the easy question to get started. I appreciate that very much, Katie. Holy crap. When you're looking at the downstream flow of this, though, and why there's so much anger, it is this culture war. And, and I saw it, right? When I officiated the same-sex wedding, I was called the tool of the Antichrist. And, you have all this thing that's happening. And I think Jake actually nailed it. It's this conspiratorial thinking. And I think conspiratorial thinking and the Constitution need to be mutually exclusive. I don't think there's any place for that. But also you have to separate the horror of Charlie Kirk's death with what we stand for as a country also. And I think if we have hate right? And people who are changing their minds immediately based on just making Donald Trump happy, it puts us in a very dangerous moment about retribution on speech, but also what it does for dehumanizing others. And I think that downstream effect is going to be pretty awful for us going forward. And again, I just don't want to agree with Tim on this because I agree with Tim on all this, but it's hard not to when he talks about he really is invoking the anger that's in the electorate in an unconstitutional and unprincipled way. And I think that is absolutely correct.